Welcome. Do you find that you criticize yourself and are hard on yourself? Maybe you treat yourself worse than you would treat anyone else. Do others' opinions about you make your day or crush your world? Are you afraid to step out and take a risk because failure is not an option for you? What in the world happened? How did this low self-worth ever get here? In this video, I will go over the breeding ground or the root causes for low self-worth. Look at each one and ask yourself, did I experience those in my life? Could this be the contributor to me not feeling good about myself? Now, this is video 2 of the self-worth video series. If you've not seen video 1, 7 proven signs that you experience low self-worth, then click on the link to access it. Before we get started, I have a trivia question for you. Guess what you think the answer is and post it in the comments. And at the end of the video, I will give you the answer and you can compare to see how you did. Here we go. Trivia question for this video is 100 women were asked, what is the most favorite part of your body? What was the top answer? A, mouth, B, butt, C, eyes, D, legs. Let me do that again. Out of 100 women surveyed, what is their top favorite part of their body? A, mouth, B, butt, C, eyes, or D, legs? Put your answer in the comments and let me know what you think their favorite part of their body is. Hi, I'm Pam McCloskey, personal development and wellness specialist. We create a pathway of tools and encouragement for women to thrive while alive. If you're new or if you're here again but haven't done it yet, make sure that you click on the subscribe button and ring the bell so that you're notified every time a new video is available. It's great to have you here. Make sure you say hi in the comments and don't forget to include your answer. What makes up a breeding ground for low self-worth? Let's take a look. So one of the first things is rejection. Rejection from others, rejection from parents or authority figures. Maybe parents or authority figures were overly critical, overly protective. Maybe you weren't allowed to do things whenever you were young because your parents were afraid you were going to get hurt or that something was going to happen to you. That is a breeding ground for low self-worth. Or maybe you were always criticized, your grades were never good enough, or you could never do enough, or the things that you did just didn't seem right. That is a breeding ground for low self-worth. Also, too permissive. Maybe you were allowed to do anything you wanted and you had no guidelines, no rules to follow, nothing to tell you that you can't do certain things. And so you were allowed to do whatever you wanted. Maybe you had parents or guardians who were busy off doing their own thing and you didn't really have anyone to give you any guidelines. That is a good breeding ground for low self-worth. Often when there are parents who are uninvolved or preoccupied, maybe they're workaholics and they worked all the time, or they just were not involved in your life. That can be another breeding ground for low self-worth because you feel like you're not important enough to have time spent for you, or that you're not good enough and that's why they're always off working or off drinking or whatever it is that they're preoccupied with. Another one is conflict between parents. When there's contention and fighting with parents, a child, and it doesn't matter, when I say child, I mean anywhere from newborn to 18 years old or even older, you can feel like it's your fault. It's your fault that your parents are fighting. I can relate to that. My parents would fight, and when they did, my name always got brought up. So I thought that I was the cause of their fights, which told me that if I was only good enough, they wouldn't fight. Or if only I could do things good enough, they wouldn't fight. So it must be my fault. And I believed that well into my 20s, even into my early 30s, until I learned that that is not true, that their conflicts that they had, the fighting that they had, that was between them. And yes, maybe I made some mistakes and I didn't always do things the way I should have. I was not the cause of the contention between them. They had their own things. Your parents who fight have their own things that is causing them to have the anger and be in a place where they're just not able to be nice or be able to they're super stressed out, because stress can cause the environment of low self, of fighting, which causes you low self-worth. So conflict between parents and authority figures can definitely make you feel like you are not worthy and you are not good enough. Divorce is another one, because often, see, as children or young adults, we don't have the brain capacity to really logically be able to look at things. We can't look at things and be able to make sense of them at that age, because your brain does not fully develop until you're 25, 26 years old. So when your parents divorce, you take on that it's your fault. If maybe you were a good girl, maybe they wouldn't have divorced, or maybe they wouldn't have gotten mad at you, and then they wouldn't have gotten mad at each other. So we take that on and absorb it as it's our fault. Let's look at siblings and peers. Even they can be overly critical, where they make fun of you, where they nitpick at every little thing. Maybe you had a bad hair day and one of your friends said something, and it's something that you remember for the rest of your life. Or maybe there was bullying going on and you were afraid to go to school because that's where the bully was, and you knew when you got there that they were going to push you around or they were going to say things to you, and it was like taking a knife and just stabbing you, and you were afraid to tell anyone because they're going to think. Now, as as you get older, you start thinking, why did I even think that? But remember, again, as a child, your brain is not fully developed. So at that moment, you're telling yourself that it is your fault and that your parents are going to get mad at you, or someone's going to get mad at you if you tell that there are people pushing you around and bullying you. Or you're afraid of what they're going to do to you themselves. And so it's like taking this beautiful cup and just smashing it into a zillion pieces. That's what it's like. When you are in an environment that is a breeding ground for low self-worth, that is what it's like. It's just like you're shattered, and yet you're trying to keep it all together because you don't want anyone to see the shattered pieces within you. What about competitiveness? Sometimes siblings and peers can be very competitive, and sometimes you can even get made fun of because you're not as fast or as strong or as smart. And so that competitiveness from the peers or the siblings can make you feel like you are not good enough, that you can't do it, and you begin to tell yourself you can't. It is a real truth within yourself that you cannot do it. Okay, what about society? So society can be overly competitive too, right? When you think about keeping up with the Joneses, trying to have everything that your neighbor has or your friend has the newest game console or has the newest phone, or maybe your neighbors down the street, they just got a pull. So now you got to get a pull. That trying to keep up is exhausting and stressful, but it also, what if you cannot keep up? Then what does that say to you? What if you keep trying and you keep failing? What does that say to you? And it can be such a competitive attitude. Sometimes when you meet someone who is extremely competitive, not always, but sometimes they're very competitive because they put who they are in their ability. Well, what happens when that ability is taken away from them? What are they left with? Their identity was so wrapped up in them being able to do this one thing that I worked with a woman that when she was in high school, she was really good in track. Okay, she could run fast, and she got hurt. She hurt her leg and she wasn't able to run anymore. Her whole identity was wrapped up in the fact that she was a great runner, that she could be very competitive and she would win. But when her identity was taken away because her identity was all wrapped up in being a runner, who was she? We have to be very, very, very careful about where we get our identity, who we are. Because if it's wrapped up in things that can go away, guess what happens? It leaves a huge void in our life and we're lost because we don't know who we are. Another breeding ground is maybe we have physical limitations. Like I said about the woman who wasn't able to run because she hurt her leg. What if you have something that happens, or maybe you were born with a limitation? That is a breeding ground for, can be, not always. If you had people who encouraged you along the way, it's probably not a breeding ground for you. But for many, many people, there are physical things, limitations that they have that tells them that they are not good enough. And they will, again, go over and over and over in their head because they have this limitation that they're not worthy, that they're a nobody. And that is not a nice place to be. If you are there, you understand that. I was there at one time, so I understand it. It is not a good place to be because you try so hard to hide how you feel. And you put that smile on and you go out into the world and you try to make it look like everything is okay, but it's really not. You're dying inside. Can you relate to that? Your environment can be a breeding ground for low self-worth. Stress, violence, trauma, all of those are breeding grounds for low self-worth because when stress gets too high, what happens? Wow, man, does your mind go, doesn't it? And you rehearse over and over. Here's the truth. When you're stressed out, your brain cannot reason. It just can't. There's chemicals that rush through your brain that keeps you from being able to reason. And so being stressed out will cause you to do certain things in your mind or say certain things, and then all of a sudden you feel guilt and shame over those things. Or if you are in an environment of violence, that violence will tell you that you are not worthy, because if you were worthy, there wouldn't be violence going on, right? And trauma, being traumatized, if you were worthy, those things wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have happened to you if you were worthy. Now, these are the things that we say inside of us. We have these root beliefs that say we're just not good enough. We are not enough. And I want to say, oh, yes, you are. You are enough. And you have to get to a place where you start listening to the real truth and not what the world and what your environment has said to you. Even moving, if you have had to move several times in your life, even switching from one home to another, or maybe you went from one town to another state, and you had to move and leave friends behind, people that you liked, schoolmates, friends, teachers, family, that all can cause a breeding ground for low self-worth. We have rejection of others, but what about rejection from ourselves? I talked a little bit about this, and that is that we compare ourselves to others. How often do you do that? It is known that if a woman walks through the door and there's a bunch of women in the room, they will all look at that woman and start comparing themselves. Is she bigger busted than them? Is she thinner than them? Is she prettier than them? Does she have longer hair than they do? Are they more beautiful than she is? Does she have nicer legs? Now, we don't do it out loud, but in our heads, that's what we do because we're always comparing ourselves to other people. And that does cause low self-worth because we're not supposed to look like other people. We're not supposed to be other people. We need to stop comparing ourselves to other people. We can overgeneralize our negatives. So maybe we have a negative because somebody said something to us and it was planted in there. And then, that person's off. They probably don't even know that we're repeating in our head what they said. Just over and over, repeating it. They're off, having their own life, not even thinking about us. And here we are thinking about them and thinking about what they said. And it has caused that place in us where we are just negative. And then other things happen and build on top of that negative. And next thing we know, we have a whole pile of garbage. Things that are not beneficial to us. Overgeneralizing negatives in your life is detrimental. But you can do something about it. And we'll talk more about that throughout this series. Harboring false guilt is another breeding ground for low self-worth. If you feel guilty for things that are not yours, and we can do that in many, many different situations, that will make us feel like it's our fault, when in fact it really is not our fault. When I talked about divorce or sexual abuse or different situations, if we take that guilt on and say it is our fault, we automatically will look at ourselves and say, see, I am not good enough. If I was worth something, these things wouldn't have happened. But the problem is that we're taking on something that's not even ours. And we can go our whole life and die with that false guilt. So that is another breeding ground for low self-worth. Hopefully you identified with some of these and have a better understanding of how they affect you. Here's the thing. These do not have to define you, and you do not have to stay silent suffering. It's easy to do that. It's easy just to pretend like it's not there or not let other people see it there. But you are the one that's going to suffer, and you do not have to stay in that place. You can do something about it. Now, the answer to the trivia question. 100 women were asked, what is your most favorite body part? What was the top answer? A was mouth, B was butt, C was eyes, and D was legs. And the answer is C, eyes. How did you do? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear how you did. What is your most favorite part of your body? If you're tired of running yourself to exhaustion and want tools to help you break free from people pleasing, then click on the link to get your copy of Time for You: 5 Simple Habits to Eliminate People Pleasing. Come back next week for part 3, Self-Worth Substitutes or Self-Worth Cover-Ups. Be sure you join the Thrive While Alive membership group for helpful tools, encouragement, and support by clicking below. Like this video if it was helpful to you, and pass it forward by sharing it. I guarantee that someone you know could benefit from it. If you missed the first video, click on the link to get access to it. You may also be interested in my People Pleasing series, which is available on my channel. Keep moving forward to thrive while alive. I'll see you in the next video.